Folks, welcome back to the Bugle Weekly. And before we get in the show, just want to just remember John C. Dvorak and what he has done for podcasting. He was the co-host of No Agenda and just died last week, leaving Adam Curry with some, massive shoes to fill. And I don't know if Adam is going to be able to fill those shoes or what, but John C. Dvorak, true pioneer in the broadcasting world, really growing podcasting. No Agenda is a very, very, very influential, famous podcast. I wouldn't call it a Bitcoin podcast, but it's a Bitcoin podcast adjacent. And him and Adam really were the pioneers of promoting, growing, creating this idea of value for value. They did it in the most boomer way possible, where people would mail them checks every week or month or year instead of doing fountain boosts. But if you're a listener to No Agenda, you know how big of a deal this is that he's gone. And I think this really marks, in many ways, the end of the era. We're watching a huge shift happen now as many of the boomers are dying off. Some of them are clutching onto life as long as possible. Some of them we like, some of them, like John, he was a good boomer. Some of them we don't like Lindsey Graham, he was a bad boomer. But we're seeing this massive shift. And as we all know, Generation X is not going to pick up the mantle. It's going to be left to the hands of the millennials, the broccoli haircuts, and even Generation Alpha. The kids that are still singing Baby Shark are going to have to fix the future, where Gen X is failing. And, we're seeing this clearly now. Rod, you've been monitoring the situation of the boomers crashing out in spaces. It seems like it's getting out of control over there. Are you seeing this massive shift happen where the boomers are?
We predicted that this would be the summer of crash outs. We predicted that the crash outs would accelerate and that he would be at a unprecedented pace. But we didn't predict, and I don't know if either of us foresaw that the crash outs would be so targeted to a single age demographic. And it's the boomers. The boomers are crashing out left and right. And maybe we can get into why. Maybe that's where we start. Why do you think that the crash outs have been so focused on the boomers? Because I thought we were going to see a lot from broccoli haircuts, because why not, right? Like the cards are stacked against the broccoli haircuts right now. They can't buy a house. They can't afford a house. They can't afford, some of them are still going to college, but they're just getting saddled with debt. They can't get a job because they're not as productive as Claude or ChatGPT. They can't afford Bitcoin. They can't afford anything. They can't afford to do anything except for, crash out. And some of them are, like, you go to the cities, you go to the urban centers, you got what Tim Dillon talked about this a few weeks ago, these flash mobs where they're just committing crimes and violence and twerking and just doing all this nonsense for the simple reason is they want to go viral. They want to be viral on social media. They want to be on video, curb stomping, somebody from the Proud Boys or Antifa or whatever. And so they're isolated crash outs from the broccoli haircuts. The millennials, again, like they've always been crashing out. They're crashing out over words coming back that were supposed to, the most offended generation in history, the millennials. They're always crashing out about being offended. And then you got Gen X, who they're crashing out at a very high rate. But Gen X just doesn't matter. It's like the least consequential generation, perhaps in American history, the least interesting, the least funny, the least culturally relevant. the least willing to take self-responsibility and personal accountability for anything. They just want to reminisce on how great Fight Club was, how great The Matrix was, argue over what's better, Star Trek or Star Wars, talk about how great comic books were, how they went and saw the band Tool, went to a Fish concert, a Grateful Dead concert, like, okay, whatever. Like, you obviously you're not even in the fourth turning yet, you're still in the third turning when you peaked. But the boomers, and I don't know, is it because their Social Security's not keeping up with inflation? Is it because they're losing all their Social Security at slot machines in Vegas? Is it because their house prices are not going up as high as they thought, and they can't sell it so they can go to Vegas again? Like, why are the boomers crashing out so hard?
I think it's a few things. I think it's because they want the Fed to lower interest rates and issue them a sense of security. But I mean, I think the boomers are crashing out for the same reason that many Bitcoin people are crashing out, is that they bought into the slop a little bit too hard, and they thought the world would look a certain way, and it doesn't look the way that they want it to. And like the boomers are just like many Bitcoin people, where they are really like okay with this idea of everything collapsing around them as long as they're rich and comfortable. And many Bitcoin people are like, oh, we have been DCAing on Swan. We're going to be, rich for the rest of our lives. We're going to watch everybody else have fun staying poor, and life is going to be, great and easy for us. That's what many of the boomers did, is they thought that they could work and take 2 weeks off vacation once or twice a year, and be able to have a Social Security check to gamble away at slot machines, and sit in Twitter Spaces all day, and argue about the weather. And instead, it seems like everything that they were betting on is
Yeah.
changing and collapsing around them.
Okay,
I mean,
well,
like these people grew up believing the moon landing was real their whole lives, and now that's in jeopardy. They believe that anybody that believed in aliens was an idiot, and now it's like mainstream to talk about aliens, or at least the government saying that there's aliens.
yeah. Well,
They
I think it really boils down to a couple of different buckets. But I think you got to start with the average boomer had, I mean, they were all born on third base, and they thought, they with life handed to them on a silver platter. There was a study that came out the other day that somebody earning minimum wage in 1971 had the same affordability and quality of life as somebody who makes six-figure salary today. You were able to work as, a cobbler's assistant at the local strip mall, part-time, making minimum wage, and you could afford a 4,000 square foot house, 2 cars, you could have 5 kids. You just put your money in bonds in the 1980s to the, 2020, and you're able to retire. Boomers were born with life handed to them on a silver platter. It was the ultimate, basically it was the Cold War, but really United States was the main economic and military superpower, especially in this, as they got towards their adult life. They lived through globalization and the outsourcing of, a lot of boomers alive today, they didn't have to work in a factory their whole lives. Most of them got to get an email job when the internet was invented, and we sent all the jobs to Mexico and China. They didn't have to work hard. They barely had to be able to learn how to use the internet and still become executives in corporations. But the problem is that they were born with this unique, in this like Goldilocks zone of having the easiest life of any human generation to ever live. But they didn't realize it. It's like the quote where the fish is like, the old fish swims by the young fish and says, "Good morning, boys. How's the water today?" And the two young fish, because they're so immersed, or you can't see the forest for the trees. They're like, what is water? The boomers didn't realize how easy they had it until the millennials and the Gen Xer or the Gen Z, the broccoli haircuts, started to point it out to them, started to mock them and say how, they were able to buy a house for a carton of blueberries back in the 1960s and 70s. And they started to reflect on their lives, and they realized that they missed out on a shitload of glaze. Like, they're seeing all the glaze going around. They're seeing all the things that they, so you can't really say that every boomer had the easiest life and just got rich on accident by trusting the government, but many did. And the ones who didn't are looking back and they're kicking themselves. And they're like, why didn't I just buy a 20-year government bond in 2000 or 1981? Why didn't I just buy a bunch of houses with the spare change under my sofa and then sell them, in the early 2020s? Like, why did I mess up? And so they're like living this, you have like midlife crises. Well, boomers are having end life crises where they didn't take advantage of all the just unprecedented once in a millennia opportunity that they had living in the easiest times of human history. And the other thing is that they're coming to this realization that they missed. They were too young to miss the last chopper out of Vietnam. And they may have missed the last opportunity to be self-sovereign in this era, in this accelerated first-turning environment that we live in. And so they're desperately clasping to the one opportunity they can have to be self-sovereign, which is being a node runner. And they've been sold this narrative that running a node makes you a self-sovereign individual. And they're finding out that maybe it's more complicated than that. Maybe a pleb node is not just you don't just give Start 9 $1,000 and now you're self-sovereign because you have a Start 9 pleb node. And being who they are, boomers who were coddled and have the easiest lives of all time, like, they don't like being told no. Boomers are not being used to being told no, and these younger generations are now saying to the boomers, no.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think they had these expectations that life is going to look a certain way, right? And they began to ask questions. Like, they never thought about self-sovereignty being, a topic discussion because it was just inconvenient, and they had everything handed to them. And so the default was always choosing convenience, but now things are becoming more inconvenient. And self-sovereignty is makes more sense and is more attractive, to consider. But self-sovereignty is difficult because, many of them, they have old bodies that can't handle self-sovereignty. They can't handle waking up every morning and tending to, the chickens and, going out and for hours and hours mending fences in the wilderness. And so, yeah, I mean, they're looking at node running as a potential way to attain that experience of being self-sovereign. But they don't. There's a technological illiteracy that they all have. They don't know how to use their iPhones.
Absolutely. They don't know how to use their iPhones. They don't know how to talk to ChatGPT. They talk to ChatGPT like it's a server at a restaurant. And we've all been with boomers who try to talk to or try, the slightest inconvenience, and they're crashing out at the waitress at TGI Fridays. And they do the same thing with ChatGPT. They do the same thing with AI. They crash out and they spend all their tokens crashing out instead of using AI to build something valuable, to create a framework that they can use, that they can scale their self-sovereignty on. And then going back to this point of like, nobody was telling the boomers no. One of the biggest crash out stories on the timeline right now is Puncher. He goes by, Puncher, like 522 or something. And if you're on the timeline, you're in the group chats, what I'm talking about. Puncher is in Maxi Madness. He was in the playing rounds. He is a staple in the spaces, especially the morning and evening Bitcoin spaces on X, formerly Twitter. And he's just, this has been a weeks long crash out. And we, come to find out, I mean, it's in his bio. It's not like we doxed the guy. He used to be in the military, and he was a fighter pilot. And which means you're an officer. So this guy was used to walking around and being saluted by plebs everywhere he went. Saluted by everybody. It was mandatory. He had to be saluted. You had to be glazed. And he's now in this wild west. He's on the frontier on Bitcoin Twitter. And people are not glad. I mean, you've got Timothy Bitcoins, who's constantly dunking on him. Vinny Bitcoins, constantly dunking on him. He's got Mars running circles around him in the group chats. And Mars ganged up with David Daly to get Hunter to rage quit Mama Humble's group chat recently. And it's just this narrative shift. Like a boomer who was in the military, I mean, support the troops, right? Like so much glaze that was it was institutional glaze that he felt entitled to. Young people did not talk back to him. And now he's just got everybody talking shit. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody has any respect anymore. And he can't handle it. And he's trying to pull up these examples of the Revolutionary War and the 3% and the support the troops narratives. And it's just those narratives, those are third turning narratives. They don't work anymore. And it's just very difficult for these boomers to handle getting talked back to and just not getting respect, by default.
Totally. Well, I mean, it's like one of the reasons why Gen X is so useless as a generation is it is very clear that they're useless as a generation because the boomers are still in power. And like the boomers have grown accustomed to this idea of younger generations just being kind of subservient to them and going along with whatever they say or by default without really questioning it. And why do they do that? Is because the boomers have held the money printers essentially. Gen X, they're like, okay, if I just like shut my mouth and do what I told, I'm going to be, handed a mortgage and then I can afford to buy a house. And like, the problem with the younger generations is the money printer isn't as accessible to them and they just don't really care, right? And so they're doing what is natural, what Gen X should have done in the first place, which is rip the power out of the boomers' hands. Because this is part of like the natural order of things, right? Is younger generations taking control of the reins of power from the older generation. You go and you watch old movies, like what happens all the time. It's, the sinister, crazy, son or nephew or whatever, like poisons their dad to like become king, in a power struggle with, their brother. There's all of those things that happen eventually. Like how does power work? Ultimately, the strong hold on to it. And it's very clear, the boomers are not like strong physically or mentally
right
now.
Oh, this is where it comes full circle. The Gen X was simultaneously the most neglected generation of all time and the most compliant because they saw how easy their boomer parents had it. And they said, I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to go with the flow, watch MTV, and I'll get what my boomer parents had. And they didn't get it. But it's too late for them now. Gen X, they did not cultivate a habit of being self-starters. They did not cultivate a habit of ambition, of making difficult choices. They just went with the flow. You know what I mean? And then the millennials were born in this like safe space bubble, this nerfed life, overprotected. And they just don't know how to operate outside of the safe space. So anytime a millennial gets too uppity, all a boomer had to do was make a racist joke or say a slur, and the millennial would start crying and run away, run back to their safe space. But Where this crashing out is starting to really come to a head is because Generation Z is completely unaffected by slurs and racist jokes. A boomer throws a racist joke at a Gen Z broccoli haircut, and they get one back so offensive that the boomer is the one crashing out. Boomers love to say the N-word. They love to make fun of women and talk about sexual harassment. But the second you question whether or not Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were good or bad, a boomer just, their brain short circuits. All a Gen Z broccoli Erica has to do is make an ironic statement glazing Adolf Hitler, and a boomer absolutely shuts down and crashes out. They cannot handle it, especially if they're Jewish. So they have no, they've never had to parent adversarially or grandparent adversarially before, until the broccoli haircuts came along, and they're just unequipped to do it, and they're too old to learn new tricks. ChatGPT can't help them, because ChatGPT's not afraid to be racist either. Well, ChatGPT maybe, but Grok's not. And for the first time, a generation is able to stand up, even though the millennials would stand up to the boomers. It was very easy to throw them aside. The Gen Z, they don't have a strategy for dealing with broccoli haircuts. And this is why we've been saying for so long, the broccoli haircuts are going to be a problem. They're not going to be a problem for a millennial unless they're making fun of it. They cry when a Gen Z makes fun of you for watching Harry Potter every day. But it's just an unprecedented time. And what's happening now, we talked about this journey to self-sovereignty running exclusively through a SpaceX node from Start9, is we have the rise of big Bitcoin. And this is, not all boomers are crashing out about this, but the boomers who thought that they were special because they started listening to podcasts a couple of years ago, and they thought node running made them special, are crashing out alongside Gen X, alongside millennials. I don't know about Gen Z, what they're crashing out about, but big Bitcoin is rearing its ugly head. We've got this new consortium of Bitcoin security for Bitcoin development. What? This is new. This might as well be breaking news. Like, what are your thoughts on this rise of big Bitcoin? Because it seems like a steamroller is coming through, and it's too early to really determine that, but it seems like a steamroller is coming through, and it is absolutely leaving a lot of collateral damage in the form of plebs in its wake.
Well, I think it's a lesson to never underestimate your enemy, right? Like, there were a lot of people that were cheering and dancing, and they said that PodConf was dead, and it was all over. They watched David Bailey's Naka stock go down, and they were dancing on Naka's grave. Big Bitcoin is incredibly resilient. And I think that's something that is important to, understand. And I think it's also important to understand that, plebs politically have almost zero power. And, when you're taking on a consortium like this, the plebs aren't going to accomplish a whole lot defensively against them. And so, if anything, the plebs, fighting back against it is going to strengthen it and, make it more relevant. And so this is really like one of those situations important to crack open The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And it is, I don't know. I mean, what is strange in this situation, which, I've been genuinely surprised by, is, big Bitcoin historically has seemed like it's more of a threat to the kind of freedom-oriented aspect of Bitcoin or the Bitcoin social movement. And now it seems like the roles have reversed, and the plebs are acting more as a threat than big Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is,
What? At the end is, I guess we'll get to the truth and the nuance in the middle here in a moment, but the risk I see is big Bitcoin is, Donald Trump, President Trump, is by most people's definition at least tangentially connected to big Bitcoin, right? I mean, many would argue that it's inseparable from big Bitcoin. And what Donald Trump, he's a good example because a couple of years ago, the country voted for Donald Trump for a second term over the Democratic Party, over Kamala Harris. No need to relitigate this, but the important point is that people didn't vote to reelect Donald Trump in 2024 so much that because he was the best candidate or a great candidate or he had good policy or people trusted him to enact his policies or because he had good ideas or he was a statesman and he had a vision. People voted for Donald Trump because the Democratic Party was so retarded and so stupid and so out of touch and just so detached from reality that Donald Trump was like, it was like a protest vote. It's like, we think that Kamala Harris and the Democrats are so fucking woke and retarded that we're going to vote for Donald Trump just to watch them crash out. I mean, after Donald Trump won, a lot of people were, like, especially Republicans, they were, for the first time, turning on MSNBC and some of these news stations just so they could watch Rachel Maddow and the Democrats, the libs, just totally crash out on the air. This is what's happening in the space, is that the plebs are so obnoxious and so retarded and just so detached from reality that people are glazing big Bitcoin as just because it's the only other option. People are saying, we'll take anything else except the plebs. We do not, I think I saw big Bitcoin tweeted, comply or be ruled by plebs. And people are like, I'd rather comply than be ruled by plebs. I don't want a future where I'm controlled by plebs. And big Bitcoin sees this opportunity. And I think that they've come in and they announced they put their dick on the table. They flopped their huge big Bitcoin dick on the table with this security consortium that Michael Saylor announced. It's like BlackRock, Fidelity. Where's the list? Let me find the list. It is the face of big Bitcoin are these companies. And people immediately came out and said, big Bitcoin is going to dig over the protocol so they can fork it for quantum security and they can steal Satoshi's coins. And everybody's mostly pleb slop, which is only helping big Bitcoin entrench its power, because everybody's response were like why you should be against big Bitcoin is just utter gobbledygook. The block is a part of an Anchorage Digital, Coinbase, Blockstream, Galaxy, Ark Invest, Cathie Wood. But for better or for worse, my take is that BlackRock and all these big Bitcoin brands saw what was going on, saw the pleb slop, saw BIP 110, they looked at the code, they gasped at how sloppy it was, and they said, we don't know if we're going to have to fork Bitcoin, steal Satoshi's coins, or whatever, because quantum computers are going to mess everything up. But we need the optionality to have the influence and the funding and the developers in place so that if that decision has to be made, we're making it, not plebs. They don't want the plebs to decide how to protect Bitcoin from quantum computers. Plebs don't understand the difference between a default setting and consensus at an abstract protocol level. They definitely don't understand quantum computers. We cannot let plebs protect our investment, which is over in the hundreds of billions, from quantum computers. So they wanted the optionality. Now that optionality becomes the optionality to change anything. But they definitely wanted, if nothing else, the option to prevent the plebs from forking Bitcoin in the face of a threat from spam or quantum computers or whatever it was. And so it's too late to really stop it now. They've already made their move. So the reaction to it, plebs are going to overreact. And it seems to be helping big Bitcoin. But Layer 2 Labs is crashing out because they know this is bad, but they can't figure out what to do. So they're lashing out. A lot of people are just lashing out. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like most of the responses are only making big Bitcoin once again seem more reasonable. It's exactly what you said. Comparing it to Donald Trump is, the crash outs essentially made the opponent seem more reasonable, and this seems to be the case of how most things are decided in the modern day is whoever crashes out the least becomes the victor. But both parties are crashing out, not really bringing a whole lot of value to the table, and it may actually be bringing something that is destructive. And are there level heads? I don't know. Plebs definitely don't have level heads, but yeah, it is concerning. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of economic power that Bitcoin has, and there's no economic power that the plebs have. But the plebs, for a while, had social power and social capital that they had been able to leverage in the past in order to influence things happening in Bitcoin. But now it seems like they are burning all of their social capital that they had. The sailor used to glaze the plebs. Now he's mocking them.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the major pivots that we've chronicled over the past, I don't know, less than a year is Sailor. He used to cater to the feelings and the emotions of the plebs in the Bitcoin industry. And that's just not the case anymore. I mean, Michael Saylor has his patience has run dry with pleb slop. It's a monster that he created. I mean, Saylor is the architect of modern pleb slop and AI slop. And he's seen what his it's like Frankenstein's monster. It's Saylor's pleb slop. And he doesn't like what he sees. And he's trying to course correct. And he's trying to protect his investment from being absolutely destroyed and gutted by the pleb slop that he created. And there's going to be a lot more pivots. And you talked about this. One of the, I don't know, highlights, but notable events last week was Neat Creations pivoted from being a Nazi, a Bitcoin 10 proponent, to becoming, for lack of it, he's just big Bitcoin. He's big. He's now ride or die with big Bitcoin. But based on his social media posts past few days, he does seem to be losing momentum and enthusiasm. He seems to be reacting to a marginal decrease in the glaze he was getting when he first pivoted, being frustrated. And this is not surprising. I think a lot of people are going to I mean, think about it. Like when you pivot to a healthy lifestyle, or you pivot from fiat to Bitcoin, or you pivot whatever, and you change your lifestyle, there's this, an endorphin rush, a high that you get. You feel like you're making the right choices, you're on the right path, you're gaining new friends. People are glazing the shit out of you. You're a new guy on the team. They want you to stick around. They want you to stay involved. And then that slowly starts to dwindle. And some people suggest that maybe Neat Creation spent or over-leveraged his social capital that he gained from being one of the first plebs to pivot. And he, maybe he's making enemies a little bit too fast. Maybe he is, maybe he's running into problems that he's just not equipped to face because he hasn't taken the time to put in the work to face them.
Totally. It's, reminds me of recovering alcoholics in a lot of ways where, they get glazed at first. Like a recovering alcoholic, they're so proud of themselves when they get sober, right? They're patting themselves on the back everywhere they go. People are so proud of them too. And then, it comes a point where it just gets old. It's like, okay, you change your life. Now you're acting like a normal person. Like normal people can like handle their shit, right? Their lives don't become incredibly unproductive and dysfunctional because of drinking. It's like, okay, now you become on the level of a normal person. It's really it's not as impressive of a feat as they make it out to be. And it's like this is the same thing with like BIP 110. It's like it's not that impressive to not support BIP 110. It's like the initial change is like, yeah, congratulations, neat creations. Like you're back to zero. You're not in the like negative 15 anymore.
And this is, I think, where the problem kind of comes in regarding the BIP 110 thing is a lot of plebs, not just plebs, but mostly plebs. They put all their eggs in one basket at the protocol level and at the emotional level, at the personal level. They made being a node runner and saving Bitcoin from this existential threat of C-SPAN and spam and whatever it is, like this mass formation psychosis that they've developed as a community about spam and the monetary use case. The arbitrary data use case. They throw out these jargon terms, very like stuff that people in normal life would absolutely have no idea what they're talking about. And they've emotionally, personally, and professionally, whatever, put all their eggs in one basket. And it's the success of BIP 110 is now like their success. If BIP 110 fails, Bitcoin fails. If BIP 110 fails, their lives, their future, the Bitcoin or the money they've saved for the future dies with it. They don't see a future outside of a BIP 110 activating successfully. So if they have no concept, if they have no imagination of their own success, their own stability outside of this narrow band of very unlikely outcome, and I guess it's from that perspective, the crash outs, I would call them irrational, but they make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Well, this is something I talked about in my article on PlebSlop that I did, when I was defining what PlebSlop was, a while ago is there's these generalizations that these people say oftentimes, like, they say good for Bitcoin or bad for Bitcoin, but there's not a clear definition of what that means. They hear these things, from influencers, and it can be interpreted a million different ways. One person might walk away and think that bad for Bitcoin means, the blockchain is getting larger at a certain rate. Another person might walk away thinking bad for Bitcoin means the price is going down. Another person may walk away thinking that, sailors buying too much Bitcoin is just, it's a very like vague term. And so when you are defining things that are important for you, or like goals that you have in life, or like a mission that you're a part of, like trying to help and, attain a goal, like there needs to be a clear definition of what it is. And like this idea of like good or bad for Bitcoin is, it's a framing that I don't think is helpful for an individual, to be determining whether or not they're happy or not based on, the surroundings around them, because it's not really definable in a sense of like, okay, it's like, is it good or bad for you? And when things that happen in the world around you that are bad for you, the answer isn't necessarily to crash out, it's to adjust your strategy and attempt to take some corrective action in order to get there. And I think this is like where they're getting stuck for sure, is like they have they haven't planned or accepted the potential for failure and of whatever their goals were. And I don't
And they
think they've
don't,
clearly defined their goals in a way that they can win. I think is part of it
and they
too.
don't, and they don't have, or they refuse to acknowledge the evidence. They don't. Plebs are not pragmatic. There's no pragmatic plebs, and I think I think that, I don't know if this will be the last episode that we talk about BIP 110 and Pleb Swap. Of course, it won't be the last time we talk about Pleb Swap. But I think if there's any doubt, I know that people don't follow this stuff as closely as we do. So I just want to get into this. So the activation of BIP 110 is scheduled, the mandatory signaling period is set to begin, and I don't have the block height right in front of me, but it's expected to happen sometime around August 8th. And unless the difficulty in the hash rate dramatically changes, that's when it'll probably occur. And some people think, based on the way they talk, that it's a coin toss. Will BIP 110 succeed or not? Some people are very sure that it will. But it's important to define success or activation and what that means. And it's also important to look at the tools we have to gauge the probability. So I'm going to just read what we see here. I'm looking at the predix.com, PREDYX. So the first prediction market by Predix on BIP 110 activating has been open for most of this year. I think the one originally was launched last year when it was BIP 444 and they had a target activation or whatever of March of 2026. They scrapped that, moved it to August, which is coming up, September for the final date. So this market, will BIP 110 activate and be enforced by Bitcoin on the most proof of work chain between September 1st and September 7th, 2026. So what this means, the liquidity right here is up to 2 million sats, and the trading volume is now up to 3.5, a little bit more than 3.5 Bitcoin, and over 16,000 trades. And the likelihood of BIP 110 success on this market, the most liquid, the most traded market that exists. There's no futures market for Bitcoins. There's only this prediction market. This is the polling market of BIP 110. Has been sitting around 10%. It's kind of gone between 4 or 5% and as high as maybe 18% at different times. But it's averaged out about 10%, about 10% success. And that's one market. That's the biggest one. That's the one that tells you the odds. You can kind of glean how accurate this one is by looking at some of the other ones. So what will the peak hash signaling for BIP 110 be by September 2026? Now, this one is only 68,000 sats trading volume, but at 77%, the best chance for the peak hash rate to signal BIP 110 is below 5%. And then you have another one, 270,000 sats trading volume. Will a top 5 Bitcoin mining pool signal BIP 110 before August 1st? That one is at 3.5% chance. We have 340,000 sats trading volume on the market. Will BIP 110 lock in before activation? And if you look back at Taproot and SegWit, both of these were wide consensus. They were very popular. The community bought in. Mandatory signaling began. The threshold was reached for signaling before the activation timeout. But will this happen again for BIP 110? Less than a 10% chance. Another market. A top 10 U.S. Bitcoin ETF issuer files an SEC disclosure addressing a BIP 110 chain split. Less than 9%. Will Saylor, this one's already over. Will Saylor support BIP 110? No. Will O'Dell admit he was wrong about BIP 110? Less than 5%. And there's a few others. There's Will Knott's overtake Core is the most popular client. Will the BIP 110 coin be listed on an exchange? Again, less than 10%. So the prediction markets where people are actually putting money on the line based on their information, based on how closely they follow this, based on how well they understand how the protocol works, they're all telling you, no, this is dead in the water. So why do people like Luke and some of the top Nazi lieutenants speak so confidently about why this will activate, because activation can occur. These guys can activate BIP 110 on their pleb nodes without reaching 55 and enforce it on their nodes. And they've been threatening, to reject the miners' blocks that don't comply. But this is where the chain split occurs. So a chain split doesn't mean that BIP 110 didn't activate successfully on a BIP 110 client node. But it does mean that anybody who's following that potentially, especially without replay protection, could lose it all. It could be whether your node forks off and you're a miner and you're wasting hash mining blocks that get rejected, or you sell your Bitcoin, and there's just a litany of potential risks here. But this is another one. What percentage of the Foundry USA? We talked about that vote. Right now, it's a 66% chance that it is below 1% signaling. And we have heard rumors that that is most likely the case, that so far they've not had almost anybody in Foundry Pool vote to signal BIP 110. So this is dead in the water. This is why people are crashing out. And people reject these prediction markets, but these are the best tools that we've got. I don't know. I mean, do you have any argument that would, or a devil's advocate that you could play here to speculate on the odds being different from what the markets are telling us?
I think they're much higher.
You think the odds are much higher? You think that so that's what I was going to say. I would say the biggest market, the one that we should probably just focus on now, is about 10%. I think that's it's clearly being manipulated. If you look at the comment section of that market, there's a couple of people who are buying and posting in the comments, and a lot of bravado, a lot of flip slop. But yeah, I think 10% is too high. I think if you buy at the 10% odds right now, you're still buying dollars for 90 cents. Still maybe worth it to buy on there.
Yeah. I don't know. It's, I think I've probably talked about it on the show before. I just think people's understanding of what's happening here is completely wrong. And I think individuals like, Mr. Hodl, per se, is, wasting a lot of time treating this as if it's some sort of technical argument and engaging it when it's really just kind of a social phenomenon that is happening, in which it's more at stake. The strongest proponents of this phenomenon have zero understanding of what's happening. But I don't know. I mean, I don't really think that there are tremendous risks in regards to there not being replay protection, because the individuals that would be potentially sending their coins and losing them in this scenario, or just facing a potential issue, they don't actually use Bitcoin. So I feel like it's minimal chances of potential blowback here, but it's I don't know.
Well, we could honestly get into this a little bit more. It's just part of, Bitcoin Cash. In hindsight, it was, it failed spectacularly, depending on your perspective, but there's still some value. You could still sell a Bcash coin for a few $100. I mean, and for a while there, it was a few $1,000s, and it was the delta between Bitcoin's price and Bcash's price was far less wide, and it's still around almost 10 years later. But part of that is because the people the Bitcoin Cash proponents were very serious. Many of them, before the fork, were like, we're selling our coins. We don't want small blocks. We want the big blocks. We want Bcash, Bitcoin Cash. And they did. They sold and they put their money where their mouth was. These were Bitcoin miners. These were economic actors, businesses, like meaningful investors, like who had meaningful amounts of ETXOs. The Bitcoin 10 side, far less. I mean, none of them really will commit to following and mining on their pleb chain. None of them really will commit to selling their Bitcoin for their B dash, as some people are calling it, B dash junior. Almost very few of them. There's only a handful of them that are holding up and propping up the prediction market. The rest of them call it gambling. To call that market gambling is a misnomer, and it reveals that they don't believe what they're saying. If you think that the successful activation of Bitcoin 10 and putting money on that on a prediction market is gambling, they're saying you don't believe essentially that you're going to win. You're saying it's at best a coin toss, which is not how prediction market outcome. That's not how these things work. Like Bitcoin 10 will either has consensus, has signaling, has support, and will activate successfully and be enforced on the main chain by September, or it won't. It's not a gamble. It's not a who knows, maybe God will come in and make Bitcoin fork in this direction. It's either going to happen or it's not, based on certain metrics that we kind of listed a bunch of them: miner hash signaling, node count, the economic nodes, the buy-in from a broad set of the industry, the activation threshold, like all this stuff. It's like, take these metrics, you plug it in, you get the probabilities. They call it gambling, which means they don't understand what they're even doing. And this is, again, like, this is the kayfabe, right? Like this bravado, this arrogance, this certainty that they project that doesn't have any backing in the hash rate or these prediction markets. Prediction markets, like I've said before, reveal kayfabe. If somebody's so sure of something, so confident, but they won't even put 100,000 sats on it, that's a disconnect. So, yeah, there's a million reasons why it will fail. There's a million reasons why they say they don't think it will fail, or that they're very confident that it will work. But the market doesn't, you take all this stuff into consideration. It's very clear that these guys don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't really use Bitcoin, at least not at the scale or extent that, Coinbase or entrepreneurs or Cypher, whatever that is, miners, mining pools. Like it's like college kids or high school kids crashing out and protesting. They have no stake in society. They don't know how societies run. They don't know how the rules work. They're just emotionally lashing out, and they want to punish somebody who they've decided is a cause of their problems, their heartache, their sadness, their depression, their lack of glaze, whatever it is. And they want to cause a burden or stress, or to rug the scammers, as they put it. It's all kayfabe.
Well, what exactly is happening right now is people engaging in the discussion. It's like you go in and arguing with plebs about this shit. It's kind of like Ben Shapiro when he went and argued with the retarded liberal college students on campus. They have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
Like their heads are just being filled with programming inserted by somebody else, by the rogue college professors, by individuals funded by wealthy, well-funded NGOs, or whoever. Like there's puppet masters behind the scenes pulling the strings. It's not very clear who they are, and so everybody watching. To recap again, what we were talking about earlier is like, people are like, okay, like big Bitcoin seems interesting and reasonable. Like, you remember, like, Ben Shapiro used to look interesting and reasonable. Now everybody hates him and he's retarded because he never had anything of value to say or was interesting. It's just like these woke college kids were just so dumb. He seemed reasonable, and like going and engaging and debating the plebs in this scenario, it's the exact same thing. It's not addressing who the puppet masters are behind the scenes. Like, what is the the outcome of what's happening here. It's a delegitimization of an institution for reasons that are not even like probably accurate or reasonable. It's like tearing down Bitcoin Core because Gloria has sex. Like, is that a real reason to tear down? To you know be bickering about spam and relay policy. Like they're virtue signaling this idea of not um, relaying transactions, but you're storing them on your node once they're confirmed in the blockchain by other people. From a technical standpoint, it's just gobbledygook. It's very silly. But from like a social standpoint, there are some very clear things that are happening in all of this. One of which is that many of the most passionate advocates for Bitcoin become the most negative mouthpieces against it, ultimately, from an optic standpoint. They're out there, whereas in the past they were pleb slopping about how you need to buy it because separating money from state, and the Federal Reserve, dollars are melting ice cube. They're pleb slopping about all of that. Now they're telling everybody that'll listen that it's taken over, that's centralized, that you're storing CSAM on your little Raspberry Pi. So that's one of the impacts that's happened from this that I think is important to look at. And you look at like Bcash, you could say that Bcash wasn't successful in the sense of like they forked and it become the predominant coin, but in many ways it was the same thing that happened prior. Was these individuals that were promoting using Bitcoin as money were hanging out in a lot of subcultural groups, hanging out in the fringes of society where Bitcoin could be used productively and people could get excited about it. And then all of a sudden, the individuals that are in the fringes become incredibly disenchanted with it, and they get blasted from both sides of the Roger Ver Bcash type people, but then also the shitcoiners, and so their heads are spinning. They take one look, one pass at Bitcoin, write it off because they heard some sort of pleb slop blockstream conspiracy completely negating it in their minds, and they're not going to do any more research because they'd rather watch Jeff Berwick jerk himself off on stage than listen to 40 hours a week of Bitcoin podcasts. And so I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. It's just the oftentimes the stated goals of these things could be dramatically different than what the actual goals of them are. And
yeah, I think one of the topics that I was hoping to get into this week, but I think is better to save for our next recording is, what is this space? What is this culture? What is this discourse? What is the mission? What does all this look like going forward? Obviously, things are not going back to the way they were. Big Sean Harris is not going to recover his social capital. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people are going to be wiped out. It's going to be a social capital jubilee, potentially. But it's going to look different. Things are going to look different. The way that people react and maneuver and, adversarially interact with big Bitcoin is going to change. It's going to have to change. The threats are going to be much bigger, and the solutions and the defense, like that's going to have the ideas are going to have to be much more thermodynamically sound. They're going to have to be much more practical, much more realistic, and much more, just not pleb slop is running into its end of life. It's going to expire. It's already expired, honestly, but it's the new use, just like the first turning. What are the institutions? What are the memes? What are the podcasts? What are they going to look like for the first turning? Because a lot of us joined the first turning a while ago. A lot of us flipped the 4 turning behind us a while ago. The rest of you, the rest of us, the first turning begins in August, whether you want it to or not. And Big Bitcoin has a head start. So, in the AI surveillance state, we didn't even get into that today, but that's coming. So, we're going to think about what comes next. But yeah, I've got to catch a plane. I'm headed to a Glaze conference, so I got to go cover that. But yeah, a lot to think about. There's still some alpha. There's still some money to be made on the prediction markets. If you know that Bitcoin 10 will fail, so get it while the getting's good.
Absolutely. It's getting hairy out there, folks, and I don't know what the next couple of weeks will look like. It's going to be a slop storm, so I think next week we'll probably be talking about the slop storm and then be talking about the aftermath after that. But I don't know. It's entertaining, to say the least. I'm entertained. I hope that you're entertained, but I also know that a good portion of people are kind of tuning out, and there will be an awesome opportunity to enjoy White Goy Summer and to tune out here in the near future with Lake Satoshi. But yeah, I mean, there's things on the horizon like the AI surveillance state. I've been scrolling on Instagram, and it's been interesting because seeing a lot of memes about cutting flock cameras down. So I don't really know if it's happening or not, but you know, it's just weird to go on Instagram and see tutorials on how to cut flock cameras down. Just it's different, it's unique. But yeah, put out paid subscriber episode a little bit ago, and I have an episode recorded with Max from Governable Misfits that I will be publishing here shortly after this drops. But there is, during times like this, when things are crazy, when it looks like big Bitcoin or big pharma or big, whatever the big conglomerate is, that is pressing down against your spirit, threatening to make life difficult for you. When tyranny is in the air, I think it's important to understand that tyranny is unnatural. It is one of those things that can only push so far because it takes a lot of energy to uphold. And so it just, while things on the horizon look bleak in some ways, the future looks difficult, potentially, there are opportunities, and it is not over. And I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful. But anyways, that being said, let's get into the Founded Boost, folks. First boost from Late Stage Huddle said, have fun at Lake Satoshi. Sorry, I won't be there this year. Well, you will be missed quite a bit. I was really bummed when I saw this. Like, I almost crashed out myself when I saw this in the group chat, Late Stage. So we will miss you, and looking forward to catching up. Maybe I'll have to give you a call on my way out there. Orange Mark 5,000 sats said, Buglers, remember to hit the share on Noster button when you send a Founded Boost. It's the best way to spread the signal and mock the plebs. Because let's be real, if you boost a podcast and don't flex on the timeline, did it even happen? Yeah, it's a good point. It's one of my favorite things is, when I go and boost a podcast, people can see it on the Noster timeline, and it's nice to share, especially since the Bugle account has gained a little bit more followers after Maxi Madness. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things that is incredibly helpful. It is one of the coolest features that Fountain has come out with, if not the coolest feature, is the integration with Noster. I mean, it's really useful from a creator standpoint. So yeah, I mean, definitely a huge thing. Like if you comment with the podcast link, or anything like that. If you ever you're an Oster, even if you don't boost, it still posts out the episode. It's pretty useful. Thanks for pointing that out, Orange Mart. Used to read a lot. 5,000 sat, always a pleasure. Appreciate you. Sasha 4,444 sats says great show, interesting times for sure. Stack Jero 2,100 sats says Kimmy K3. Rev Hodl 420 sats said I will spend the rest of my days searching for the mother of all nodes. Hashtag 40HBW. Yeah, mother of all. I just wonder how much power it has. Size Stormbreck 121 sats says join a cult, have lots of sex, run your truth nodes, gatekeep the blockchain. Are you in the influencer class? Tallow Glaze Maxine, Bugle Weekly News forever. Nostr Gang 101 sats says I am sometimes naked while listening to Bitcoin podcasts. BTC on board. So 100 sats. Thumbs up emoji. Salute. Thumbs up emoji. I think one of the I've been reluctant to call what we're experiencing right now a war. I mean, I guess in many ways it's culture war. They want to call it the node wars. I would call it the slop wars. But one of the characteristics of a war is being so intensely into it that you have trouble seeing what the future will look like afterwards. And I think socially we're all a little bit uncertain. There's going to be some serious repercussions and fallout for it. Hopefully people are prepared to accept the consequences for their behavior. And I know we are. We have no issues with reporting the news. And I think we've done it effectively, and I feel good by standing by everything that we've done. But I know, it's been funny because there's been some people that claim to be keeping receipts. It's just nice that somebody has a backup of our bangers. Hopefully more people keep receipts on us. But yeah, thank you to our subscribers, Dave, Jolly Roger, Jason C. used to read it a lot, Lahav, BTC on board, Boomer, Fundamentals, Sean, Open Mic, and Avi Burra. Appreciate you guys, and try and get some more premium content out to you guys soon. Thank you, folks, for listening to Bugle Weekly, and we'll catch you next week.
Bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges. Yeah, bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges. Yeah. Sometimes you have no choice but to take the role of a villain. When the plebs lost their minds and cooked ideas need killing. Do a line of coke before I take on their whole coalition. Testing them to see if they still have any cognition. I be probing, just hoping they still have at least some of their brains. They crying and lying, melting like sugar when I make it rain. Listening to boomers crash out like it's an epidemic. Mass formation, Delulu, it's clearly systemic. I'm trying to snap them out their pleb slop hypnosis, but it's like they're all addicted to a victim psychosis. Bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges, getting lost in the sauce. Firmware is glitching. Bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges, lost themselves inside the algorithm's vision. Yeah, they are so cooked, everyone is starting to dogpile. Big Bitcoins laughing sailor when shotting them with style. Copy, paste, repeat, that's your whole religion. Boomers watching credit videos glued to their television. Flat top on his head, no brain between his ears. Call him Big Sean, bitch, wipe your salty tears. Fighter pilots in spaces crying like little girls, claiming that spam is a reason to be clutching their pearls. Try thinking for yourself, that be a plot twist. Sloppers tell you to jump, you don't even question it. Bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges, getting lost in the sauce. Firmware is glitching. Bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges, lost themselves inside the algorithm's vision. Yeah, when you keep acting a fool, people will remember. Gloria is hot, yet they still all condemned her. Just kill some brain cells, listening to Luke DeWolf. I hear the sex isn't even good in their cult. Copy paste, conviction isn't something to flex. Getting glazed by bots isn't the same as having respect. Y'all treating bips like celebrity fan fiction, overwhelmed with cognitive dissonance, drowning in contradiction, telegraphing their demise if the Sybil attack doesn't work. It's like they're trying to give reasons for the giggle or the smirk. Bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges, getting lost in the sauce, firmware is glitching. Bitch, I'm watching them burn their bridges, lost themselves inside the algorithm's vision. I don't mind being a villain in the eyes of the pleb. I know some beta has a computer folder full of my tweets. Hopefully he's jerking off of me instead of mechanic. At least it will make him slightly less gay. Dun 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 dun.